Should two consenting adults be allowed to duel each other without legal ramifications? Why or why not? Texas resident here. Mutual combat to settle differences is 100% legal as long as A. There's a neutral third party to supervise, B. The fight ends when someone either tapes out, passes out, forfeits, and C. No weapons, fisticuffs only. Still waiting for my chance to be the third party. ETA. Also, no one is allowed to place bets on the outcome. That used to be a thing in Austria around 1900. It was eventually outlawed as the emperor realized that a whole generation of his best officers and soldiers were dueling each other to death for any perceived slight to their honor. Edit. A lot of replies are talking about fencing, cheek scars and other duel traditions of German-speaking countries. While all of that is true, it was mostly pistol duels that ended up so deadly as to affect the demographics of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, which makes sense, I guess. Dueling with sabers, rapiers and so on were quite common, but mostly only fought until first blood was drawn or one party conceded. It's not so easy to kill someone with a blade actually. Then fashion trended towards pistol duels. Death was a more common outcome, but flintlocks are slow and unprecise. Often both parties wouldn't hit on their first shot and had several minutes between reloads to consider whether they wanted to go through with this again. Then pistols evolved faster than our customs and a revolver duel would very easily be deadly for at least one party. George Washington had the same issue. In banning duels among his troops, he was going against a major part of being a man and maintaining honor in Southern and Mid-Atlantic culture. As I read more about Washington's troop management, his efforts to ban dueling tell me just how beloved he was. He essentially struck at the very concept of honor as his men perceived it. But his men loved him so much that not only did they try to stop dueling each other, but they started fighting duels over the duel ban itself. Someone would insult Washington's honor over the duel ban, and someone in support of Washington's duel ban would duel to defend the duel ban. But wait, Washington seems to say, this is the opposite fucking thing I wanted. The Lee Lawrence duel is an interesting eyewitness account of the duel/honor/ban paradox, probably my favorite duel of the era. People most likely to fuel are hot-headed young men, I guess. I may be wrong, but historically that seems to be the case and based taste on school-ground diplomacy in conflict. Taking it to modern-day context, would a country want its healthiest citizens killing each other? You, aka the country, aka we, have invested a considerable amount of resource in educating and keeping them safe to adulthood. The gamble is that as they grow up they will in turn become happy, product citizens who contribute to the net pot of that country's resources. Allowing duels, or any kind of capital punishment undermines that. Teach people conflict resolution, not infighting. While technically two adults should have the right to sign up to duel, a few issues potentially arise with the slippery slope that it presents. People will start holding vendettas and revenge duels become popular, where the child or spouse of a dueler wants justice or revenge and taints the moral vagueness of having consenting adults. What if the angry party stops at nothing and kills someone outside of a duel? The cycle of violence just spirals out of control. You also get the issue of how do you certify a duel was legal or who is in charge of being a third party to a duel? What if people cheat and hire their own legal aid to declare someone that was murdered to have signed a duel agreement? These are just examples, but you see what I mean. Simple and interesting concept, but I think it isn't sustainable. It would also become entertainment. People will consent to getting their brains beat out if there is money in it. But as a society we don't allow death sports, by which I mean sports where death of one combatant is a certain or near certain outcome. Once there is pro sports money in it, the question of consent is really, are you willing to die to get your family from poverty to multi-generational wealth? Most people like living. People who are willing to literally fall on their sword are few and far between, especially at the level of comfort we have now. The ones who are willing to participate in the duel want a fair fight because they want to win on their standards, and apparently duels are quite easy to create. Rules for https://www.reddit.com/r/askhistorian/comments/for/w16kv/how_and_cheating_with_and/first comment down. Nothing is sustainable if people want to put their lives on the lines in battle. Let them. It's not like it isn't being done now anyway, legally, with gang deaths etc. You're just trying to look at it through only your perspective and then think of the limited logic and coming to the easiest conclusion. Humans are smart, and the ones that came up with the rules far exceed my intelligence. It'll just fall out of favor again like it has in the past, but then we can all enjoy the duel, and if something is that important to someone, chances are you will think about why this person chose to die by their beliefs. Also, as Nirank said, it could be really good for our healthcare system. The type of people who are willing to die in a duel are going to be the ones who live life harder. Those people generally pay for it in the end with health problems which are a burden on all of us. So I say let them. If someone who was biologically born a male is allowed to call themselves a woman, why shouldn't a person be able to duel? Number. You can never really know whether they're consenting or whether one of them is being blackmailed/threatened/whatever into the fight. In past times where duels were allowed, backing away from one also bought you an amount of ridicule and ostracization that meant participating wasn't really optional either. Then there's the danger to bystanders. The possibility of a full-blown fight if someone decides to intervene on the part of someone that looks to be losing. If they really want to settle a disagreement that way, let them duke it out in a kickboxing ring or something. In past times where duels were allowed, backing away from one also bought you an amount of ridicule and ostracization that meant participating wasn't really optional either. Mainstream society was honor-based, like prison life. This kind of mindset is most common in poor and uneducated people today, but in the past, upper-class men were expected to defend their reputation in the same way that gang members are today. There is a logical connection to history. The upper class is descended from militarily aristocracy knights. While it resonates deeply with human nature and ancient threads of our culture, this kind of aggressive honor-based system is stupid as fuck. We aren't in Gaul. We don't have to live like we are. Legalizing dueling would elevate primitive values which are best left in the past. Yeah, this is the main reason. People who think law is the only reason to do something or not do something are fucking donkeys. The moment dueling becomes culturally accepted, it then quickly becomes culturally expected. There are a great deal of great minds that would make great advancements to our world that would get murked by this fact. It's not just that stupid people would shoot each other, and anyone who thinks they are an exception to that rule are short-sighted at best and need to rethink why they are the way they are. In past times where duels were allowed, backing away from one also bought you an amount of ridicule and ostracization that meant participating wasn't really optional either. There is a theory that it led to a more peaceful society because being an asshole could get you challenged, putting you at a risk of death regardless of wealth and status. So you had an incentive to settle conflicts before it came to that, and not instigate needless conflict. Yes, you can. You don't have to have it on the spot. In fact, you shouldn't have it the same day, and you can get witnesses. Smarter humans have figured out very well in the past that ridicule is deserving. You thought you knew so much that you go to the point of wanting to duel and then checking out. That means you're a bully and were just trying to get your own way. It would be a great life lesson to them, and they may have to move in order to make a life for themselves, but whatever. On the case of feeling pressured to, if you're that goddamn stubborn, you deserve it, or they won't because they admit they don't know as much or they don't care about it as much as you. Also, there's going to be people who become laughing stocks because they want to duel over everything, which will eventually make them chill out and stop. The dueling it out in the ring is a bad idea too. Guns make you equal, and it's more a battle of will. Fists can be one-sided, and if you allow duels, then someone bigger and stronger will only say want to duel and bully everyone into submission. Also, you gotta think of the health system. Someone dies, it barely shows a blip. You take thousands who will now want to legally live this way and get into duels, then they get traumatic brain injury and have to be cared for over a lifetime, worst case scenario, which will cause great stress to the system. There's no danger to bystanders. We're smart enough to know how to have a duel safely, but it's not your life. If someone can say they're woman when they were born a biological male, why not allow someone who is willing to fall on their sword? People should feel free to be themselves no matter what. We shouldn't feel the need to control others' lives so much, but rather rules that all live by. Follow the rules, do what you want. Not just that, but it puts us back in the might makes right camp, which is worse than wealth makes right, because frankly wealth is more achievable for many members of the population, and also less people die, and wealth often counts as might anyway. More time to exercise, better food, better resources and trainers. We're supposed to be working towards increased equality, and duels as a conflict resolution mechanism in the legal system do not do that. If the option existed, there would be social pressure to back one's beliefs with a willingness to duel, so people would accept without necessarily wanting to. This is exactly why it should exist. But only for politicians. Too many of them get away with lying, and their bullshit tends to enact losing money, resources, and lives. If they aren't ready to die for their lies, then they shouldn't be ready to take the responsibility of leading a nation. A method to decrease the amount of shittiness in the world. According to the Call Center Workers Proclamation, each citizen after a period of 1 full year working full-time hours in a call center may nominate one person who has called them during that year to experience 10 seconds of electoral punishment shocks. As per the proclamation, the 10 people with the most nominations shall be televised as they receive their electoral punishment shocks while excerpts from their calls are played. Karen Smith sits at number 1 this year, having earned 2.7 hours of electoral punishment shocks. No, if only for the fact that those 2 people aren't the only ones who will be affected by the outcome. Friends, family, dependents, neighbors, colleagues, all of them will suffer the consequences in one way or another, and society at large will pay the cost if the practice becomes widespread. A society where people want to murder each other as a means of settling disputes or attaining justice is a backwards honor-based society, one where petty pride and ego are treated like high virtues instead of the monkey brain stupidity they are. It's a step in the wrong direction, without question. Violence is a dangerous thing to condone, especially between individuals. It's not just a matter of one person doing physical damage to another's body, it's a sociological taxon. If you need proof of this, just look around the world at societies where interpersonal violence is the go-to means of attaining justice. Look at societies where honor is treated like a sacred virtue. I'm from Ireland, where tit-for-tat murder was the norm for decades. They killed one of ours, so we killed 2 of theirs. In the end, peaceful and political resolutions are the only ones that actually worked. Succumbing to those feelings of violent rage we all feel at some point is not the way to handle it, not if you actually have a halfway noble goal in mind. It works that way for individuals and entire nations. Beating someone to death with a pool noodle sounds exhausting. I feel like you'd have to asphyxiate them, right? Like my first instinct would be to wrap it around their neck, but I think it's maybe too foamy to actually constrict. You could twist it to try to tighten it and make it denser. It would definitely choke better that way, but I think most would just be likely to rip. I think your realistic best-case scenario is to just forcefully shove it down your opponent's throat one chunk at a time till they choke. I think that counts as using a pool noodle. Or potentially, you could wrap it around their neck, but instead of choking them just use that grip to bash their head into something. But does that count as using a pool noodle? And of course you should have that right. In both cases, there are practical concerns that must be balanced. Just as we have the right to destroy our own property, yet we must prohibit people from setting fire to their house in a crowded neighborhood. I fully support the right to choose euthanasia, because we do have a right to end our lives, and we often need help to do it properly. I should be able to take a pill given to me by a doctor, while surrounded by loved ones. Having this right would prevent so much pain and financial ruin. I do not support legalizing duels. While we have the right to end our lives, great harm and little benefit can come of a culture of dueling. Personally, I think there are issues with the system we have now. Zero tolerance for fighting in school leaves one with few options and minimal experience in the real world should they need to use force. I know that the ideal is that we have a world where these skills are no longer needed. I appreciate that, but we don't live in that world. We live in a violent world. Despite some level of reduced violence, we can hope and pray that there will be a day where we can put down our fists and put away the sword. But until then, it's important to give people the tools they need to survive and thrive. An armed society is a polite society. It is a popular heinlein quote, often repeated by people who are in favor of, well, an armed society, but far from being an endorsement of such things. It is a warning. The story it comes from, Beyond This Horizon, tells of a world where dueling is legal, and those who will duel walk about armed, ready to take offense at the slightest of grievances, and those who do not wish to duel wear signifiers of their unwillingness to do so, and are relegated to second-class citizenship. It is fiction, but illustrative. In societies which practice dueling, a common refrain from duelists after the fact was that they dueled because they were cowards, and afraid to face the censure of society which expected them to do so, and that true courage was exercised by those who rejected a challenge despite the opprobrium that they knew it might bring upon them. The banishment of the duel from social discourse was an objective good, and it should certainly never be brought back. The main issue is that once dueling culture becomes prevalent, as has happened before, consent becomes very iffy. Lots of people fought duels because they felt they were obligated to do so, due to societal pressures and the general notion of honor. Is it still consent when you firmly believe you have no other choice but to accept a duel, even if you really don't want to fight it? Is it still consent when declining the duel could ruin your societal standing and reputation? There's a reason why duels were outlawed. All of them were nominally consensual, but in practice a lot of them had one party who really wanted to fight a duel, and another who felt they had to fight it and had no real option to decline. The problem is, as can be seen from when it was still practiced, it promotes attitudes that forces people into duels. It makes people begin thinking about duels as legitimate means to resolve problems over other solutions. And suddenly people will tell you to defend your honor because of something a person did that they see as a slight on your honor, which was how duels not uncommonly happened. I sort of remember one account of a duel where one party insisted on trying again and again since they kept missing each other musket pistols, and eventually one of them died. So it wasn't enough to just show up or even brave the duel apparently. This is the kind of madness dueling promotes. And if both adults are consenting, mentally sound and understand the risks, why would they duel in the first place? This is already allowed within regulated conditions, like boxing, martial arts and fencing. In the UK, consent is a defense to what would otherwise be an assault, up to a certain level. Properly organized sports and games is one of the categories of consent. So if you set up the Professional Dueling Association, you'd be fine. This all assumes no dying. That's where it becomes tricky, because then it can effectively be assisted suicide, euthanasia, which is a whole other moral issue. The issue of coercion, forced consent, etc. also becomes more of an issue the more likely serious harm is. I don't think I'm comfortable with either of those. Doctor, already fine to hit each other with fists or pointy sticks, but combat involving potential death has serious moral issues I'm not comfortable with. It wouldn't really solve anything. The problem would still be there, except now people are either really pissed off and want revenge, hurt, or dead, which would cause people to fight even more. It doesn't really solve the issue as to why people feel the need to duel in the first place. If the issue gets solved, there isn't a need to duel. Although I do understand the idea in thinking someone needs an ass beating to understand boundaries. Sometimes with bullies it works, but if someone is a big enough asshole, you can beat their ass 20 times and nothing will change.